It is. It's Sunday afternoon from somewhere in the Great Lakes area. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher of SpartanMag.com. We will be back in East Lansing on Monday morning. Michigan State's pads will be going on. Full pads for the first time. That'll be Monday morning. Michigan State preseason football camp coverage continuing over at SpartanMag.com. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher of SpartanMag.com. I want to say thank you to Paul Konerdijk, associate editor, SpartanMag.com, Jason Killip, recruiting anchor, and also a great football correspondent over there as well as Kenny Jordan. Jake Laskawa doing a great job, great intern, has a great future in the business. We appreciate all those guys and the cast of thousands over at SpartanMag.com. Helping SpartanMag.com to continue to be the leader in Michigan State coverage on the internet. It's been that way since the 1990s, since the beginning of the internet. It's been SpartanMag.com. We appreciate those of you that have been with us all the way and been supporting us. And those of you that are new, we appreciate new maggers all the time. Give us a like here on the channel. Subscribe to this channel. We appreciate that. Go over to SpartanMag.com. Consider becoming a Spartan Magger. Consider becoming a Spartan Mag subscriber with coverage of Michigan State preseason camp as well as conversation on the Underground Bunker message board all the time, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Continued conversation at the Underground Bunker message board. That is the daily narrative of Michigan State sports. It is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State sports. SpartanMag.com. Check it out. We'd love to have you. Today, Spartan Mag Live, 3 questions, 3 and out. We'll get out here. Let's get back to your Sunday. Those of you checking in from places where it's really hot, maybe you're indoors enjoying a little bit of shade. Right now, I'm the same place I was 2 weeks ago. North shore of Lake Erie, like I said a few weeks ago. Monroe, Michigan is over that way. Detroit's that way. Ohio's that way. Sandusky, Cedar Point's maybe about 40 miles as the crow flies that way. But we are in Canada, as you can see by the flags. Canadian flag over there. Canadian flag and a Michigan State flag underneath it. Brother-in-law put that one up there. He's a big Spartan. He's a season ticket holder. He's a whack job. He's a good guy. He's a Michigan State fan. Those of you know I'm not a flag waver. That would be just not our style. We try to be credible correspondents. But those of you that are Michigan State fans might appreciate the international representation going on right now. So anyway, go ahead and leave a couple of comments in the comments section. We'll get to those in a moment. We got 3 questions. I'll get to question 1. Then we'll look at the comments a little bit later, and we'll get into it. As a matter of fact, let's just go to question 1. I also got some news. You know, some of this news starting to trickle in about the Michigan situation with potential NCAA violations. That's certainly an interesting situation for Michigan fans, and of course, fans for a lot of teams around the Big Ten that have played Michigan in recent years that have may have been subjected to some, I don't know how to say it, competitive disadvantages, maybe against a good team that probably didn't need it, but probably helped them avoid some shutouts, or not shutouts, but avoid some upsets. And maybe more importantly, messed with some lines in Las Vegas, because when you have things like that when you have competitive skewing of things, you know, back when gambling was illegal, people didn't care about it as much. But now that it's legal, I mean, gambling, it's a state and federal operation these days. So you mess with that, it gets a little dicey. Although we've not seen that specifically come up in the notice of allegations, but you know that there's some it's uncomfortable for a lot of people. Anyway, question number 1. Ernie from Colorado says, greetings from smoky and forest fire-filled Colorado. He says, besides Nick Marsh, who are some of the redshirt freshmen and true freshmen that you're expecting to get some meaningful snaps this season? Freshmen and redshirt freshmen, really good question. As we get into camp, I've seen a little bit of the true freshmen, not as much yet because they've not gone on full pads yet. But, you know, of course, for true freshmen, everybody knows about Nick Marsh. True freshman, about 6'2", plays bigger than that. He's physically strong for a true freshman, which is going to help him. You know, top 100 player, I don't know, he's top 3 in the state of Michigan last year. Arguably could have been number 1 from River Rouge. As a matter of fact, I went to his commitment press conference about 12 months ago from here over to River Rouge last year. Saw Kenny Jordan over there and Jason Killip. We covered that last year. Nick Marsh enrolled early, had a nice spring, certainly on track, ahead of schedule as a true freshman to be able to help right away. Last week in the series that we do at SpartanMag.com, I've got a series of articles in which I discuss or project the depth chart, because there is no official depth chart for Michigan State. Nothing official has been released since, I don't know, 2019 or so in terms of depth chart. So we at SpartanMag.com put together our projected depth chart, and we go with it. And it'll change throughout the season. Once the games start, we will obviously everybody will get a better idea what the depth chart is. But we did a depth chart preview of the wide receiver position a few days ago, and Jerron Glover most likely the starter at the X split end. Montori Foster most likely starter at the Z, the flanker position, what they used to be called a flanker. And both of those guys I think are going to be improved this year, and I think they're good, solid, accountable, functional plus wide receivers. Glover still with only about 14 catches last year as a true freshman. That's a good year. But we hear some good things from Jonathan Smith about Jerron Glover, the sophomore from Florida. Or is he from Georgia? I got to look that up. I should know that off the top of my head, but I do not. I think he's from Florida. He's from Florida. Yeah, he's from Sarasota. Anyway, about 14 catches last year, had a good spring. Jonathan Smith mentioned him as having had a good practice on day one last Tuesday. So those are the two starters. Most people expect those two to be the starters, Glover and Foster. So who's the third starter at wide receiver? In the projection that I wrote, I put Nick Marsh in there. Even though he's not naturally a slot type of receiver, in the spring, I went back a few nights ago and rewatched the spring scrimmage to see which of the three positions he was playing. And Marsh, with the twos, basically played all three positions. And on last Thursday, Brian Lindgren, Michigan State offensive coordinator, was talking about progress with some players, and he mentioned Nick Marsh. He might have been asked about Nick Marsh. And he mentioned that Marsh can play all three positions, which is uncommon for a true freshman to be able to come in and do that. That usually happens later in your career. And that was congruent with what I had seen one or two nights earlier when I went back and watched the spring game. Only 15 practices into his college career, a true freshman, a guy that had enrolled early, basically a high school senior who enrolled early, to be playing all three positions with the twos, albeit, and had an impact afternoon that day in the spring showcase scrimmage. So, yes, he can play all three positions, which leads me to believe that I think there's a chance he might be starting at slot. I don't think he's a slot long-term for Michigan State, but I think, or maybe he moves out to the X and they put Glover in the slot. I'm not sure, but either way, there's some flexibility there and certainly a lot of talent. So he says besides Nick Marsh, who are some of the redshirt freshmen and true freshmen that I expect to get some meaningful snaps this year. Now, first of all, getting snaps. Let me double check something really quick. Also, I got to make sure that it's coming through here, right here, and not the laptop audio. Let me check. Yes, it's coming through here. Good. Just want to double check that. So in terms of freshmen that could help this year, that could get, as you say, meaningful snaps. Well, first of all, go back to last year. There's only five redshirt freshmen right now, I think, on the team, redshirt scholarship freshmen from last year's recruiting class. Last year's recruiting class, there might have only been 18 guys, and many of them have transferred out. Let me call that up also right now. When you talk about people like Sam Levitt, who transferred out, By Job transferred out, Andrew DePape transferred out. So you're talking about last year, a recruiting class of 20 players. No, I think it was 18 players. Let me find it right now. Because you're wanting to know about redshirt freshmen. My point is there's not many redshirt freshmen still in the program. Last year, 17 players in the recruiting class. By Job gone. Andrew DePape gone. Jordan Hall still around. Stanton Ramil still around. Keyshawn Blackstock gone. Jalen Thompson still around. Those three guys doing a good job. Brendan Parachek still around. They're doing a good job. Sam Levitt gone. Chance Rucker still around, doing a good job. Possible starter. Cole Dillinger still around, getting healthy. I think he's off to a decent start this fall. We'll talk about that in a minute. Eddie Pleasant gone. Jalen Barbering gone. Isaiah Johnson around, redshirt wide receiver. Jalen Smith around, redshirt wide receiver. Sean Brown gone. Phillip Davis still around. So 7 out of 17 are gone. That's only, I guess, 10 redshirt freshmen that are still around. Maybe 9 Got Jalen Smith, Isaiah Johnson, Stanton Ramil, Cole Dellinger, Philip Davis. And then Jordan Hall's not a redshirt freshman. He played last year. That's why they're not redshirt freshmen anymore. Jalen Thompson, not a redshirt freshman. He played last year. Brendan Parachek played last year, not a redshirt freshman. Chance Rucker, not a redshirt freshman. So in terms of redshirt freshmen, 5 are still around. Jalen Smith, Isaiah Johnson at wide receiver, Stanton Ramil at offensive line, Cole Dillinger at offensive line, Philip Davis. So there's only 5 redshirt freshmen to choose from, unless there's a redshirt freshman non-scholarship guy that could possibly make a dent, but I'm not anticipating that right now. So you're asking me about freshmen and redshirt freshmen that could get, as you said, expecting to get some meaningful snaps. We'll start with those redshirt freshmen. Stanton Ramil, Cole Dellinger, I think there's a good chance that they are second-string offensive linemen. Watched them a little bit last week. The pads go on now. They've got to stay healthy, first of all. And I think Ramil is a guy they were really high on last year. The previous staff and the current staff was intrigued to see what he looked like. Was looking pretty good last spring. Had a setback, as I was told, in terms of not really an injury, but just a setback is what it was called. So he didn't play in the spring showcase. We didn't see him. So we still have not seen him actually engage people in full pads. Still going off of reputation and potential with Stanton Ramil. I am in terms of trying to forecast where he might be this year. Looks like he's repping at left tackle, as near as I could tell. Possible, second string potential candidate there. But just watching him a little bit on Tuesday, he's quick. He's got a nice frame. So, and Michigan State does not have a lot of depth in the offensive line, so I think it's possible he could be a second stringer. Same thing with Dellinger. We didn't see he sustained an injury last fall. Also, did not see him last year. Neither of these guys played in mop-up time last year because they were injured early in the season. So we didn't even see them in blowout situations. Then we didn't see them in the spring. Stan Ramil practiced a little bit in the spring, but we didn't see him. We saw him without pads early in the spring. Then we didn't see him later. But both of those guys, just watching them Tuesday, I thought they were moving well. I didn't see any restrictions. They got to stay healthy, but I think there's a chance those two guys could both be second-string offensive linemen. And like Jonathan Smith and Lindgren have said, they would like to have 8 or 9 offensive linemen rotating in. If they could. I don't know if they're going to have 8 or 9 that they can depend on, but if those guys become dependable, you might see them on the field. Jonathan Smith has said, and he showed it at Oregon State, that philosophically he likes to get second-stringers as much playing time as possible. Not as possible, but in as many games as possible. Just give them a series just to get them some experience and also manufacture some depth. Philip Davis, defensive back. The whole defensive back situation is an unknown, including true freshmen. We'll talk about that in a moment. There's a lot of starters coming back. So the second string, third string, how those shuffle in and shuffle out, and some transfers coming in. So I'm not really expecting Philip Davis to butt his way in there right now, but he's still on the program. Other ones like Sean Brown and some others, Eddie Pleasant, freshman from last year, went into the portal, and you can bet that they were kind of encouraged to go into the portal. Well, not Philip Davis. He's still around. So that's, at least for now, seems to be a vote of confidence. But only 5 redshirt freshmen in the program: Jalen Smith, Isaiah Johnson, Stanton Ramil, Cole Dellinger, and Philip Davis. I just talked to you about just now about those offensive linemen. Jalen Smith and Isaiah Johnson, I predicted that either one of those two could be among the true freshmen that would get into the playing group last year. Didn't turn out to be the case. I liked their high school film. I thought Michigan State had a position needed at wide receiver. Those two guys played a little bit, maintained redshirt status, but were not game in and game out on the field. So I was wrong about that. I didn't necessarily predict it. I just said that conditions were favorable that either of those two guys could end up getting on the field. Did not end up happening. So this business about trying to predict which freshmen are going to get on the field has always been really difficult. I've been trying to do it for 30 years, and it's difficult. So in terms of true freshmen, besides Nick Marsh, on offense, Brandon Tullis, we saw him at running back in the spring game, and he looked like a guy that could play college football right now. True freshman out of Texas, was a little bit better than I anticipated. Essentially, he leapfrogged Jalen Berger and Davion Prim, was better than either of those two in the spring game. Basically repped as the number 2 tailback in the spring game behind Nate Carter and looked like the second best running back in the program. Now Michigan State goes out into the portal and gets K'Ron Lynch-Adams, transfer from UMass, who gained over 1,000 yards rushing last year. I think it's going to be Nate Carter and K'Ron Lynch-Adams, the 1-2 punch at running back. Lynch-Adams talked to Lindgren last week, and he's on schedule, looking pretty good. He's been there all summer, working out, very serious, very excited to be playing at Michigan State. So I think those are the two guys, of course, Carter and Lynch-Adams. Usually a third running back gets some carries, not a lot. They'd love to play just two, but provided they stay healthy, it's just those two. If someone gets a tweak or so forth or something like that, who's number 3? Or if it's a blowout situation, who's number 3? I think it's going to be Brandon Tullis. You've got Mekhi Frazier also coming in as a true freshman, just now reporting. Tullis will be ahead of him just from spring practice and also what he showed in spring practice. I do not anticipate Frazier leapfrogging him. And in terms of other running backs, that walk-on, McCaig, I know he's a true freshman, but that guy looks like a football player. I like that guy. Jackson McCaig. Where was he from? Was he from Plymouth? Yeah, he's from Plymouth. 6'1", 236. He's gained about 15 pounds since his senior year. Last year rushed for 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns at Plymouth High School. I went back when he committed after signing day. I went back and looked at his film, and he's got some vision, some cutting ability, some power. Does not have like that next gear speed, but I mean, he looks like a walk-on that you like to have around. I think that was good walk-on recruiting for Michigan State to get him in there and give him a shot. I don't close the door on him being better than Mekhi Frazier right away. We'll see. But Tullis would be one to answer your question when you're asking me which freshman I'm expected to get meaningful snaps. Now, are those meaningful snaps with Brandon Tullis? I just mentioned blowout situation. Are those meaningful snaps? Not by your definition. But if there's an injury or so forth, knock on wood, I think Tullis is a guy that could get in there. Ramil and Dellinger, I think they're second stringers. You don't want any injuries on the offensive line because Michigan State has a lot of unproven, inexperienced players on that second string. You don't want that to happen, but that could happen with either of those two. And Nick Marsh, of course, the other one. As far as other true freshman offensive linemen, Charlton Lunyeski out of Ohio. He and his twin brother Mercer Lunyeski came in. They committed to Mel Tucker, stuck with Michigan State, enrolled early, played in the spring. I think Lunyeski Mercer Lunyeski lost some weight after spring practice. But when I looked at the film of these guys after they committed their junior film, I thought Mercer Lunyeski looked a lot better than Charlton. And then I looked at their senior film, and I thought Charlton had done a lot to catch his brother and pull even. I thought they both had pretty good film. Then they get here in spring practice, and I thought Charlton was excellent. We wrote about this in the offensive line depth chart series, and we do like plus and minuses, like plus plays and minus plays in the scrimmage. And I had Charlton Lunyeski, I think, with more plus plays than anybody on the offense. It doesn't mean he's the best player. He just like continually showed some good functional plus plays. And I wrote down like who he was going against. Maybe Ken Talley a couple times. Maybe Jackson Wilson a few times. Not necessarily first stringers, but an encouraging spring scrimmage for a guy that should be shopping for his prom tuxedo. So Charlton Lunyeski, I would not write him off as being a possible second string guy on the offensive line. Now, as far as true freshmen coming in, well, those guys are true freshmen, Marsh and Lunyeski and Tullis. Others, I'm looking at defensive backs. Again, it's going to be tough to get in there because Michigan State has a lot of returning starters in the defensive backfield and a lot of transfers coming in. I think 3 scholarship transfers coming in. So it's crowded for true freshmen. But can a true freshman get on the field for special teams? Something like that might be more likely. What I'm getting at is I'm not seeing a lot of like really strong candidates to help right away. Michigan State brought in a lot of transfers, and a lot of those transfers have come in to try to help soon. So these days it might take longer for true freshmen to get on the field. Last year, like I said, we saw about 4 or 5 of them, several of them on defense and basically emergency situations. As far as true freshmen, Talking about the true freshmen coming in, the defensive backs, Keyshawn Williams, Andrew Brinson, Justin Denson, Jalen Thompson. We saw Jalen Thompson, not the Jalen Thompson from Detroit, Jalen Thompson, the DB from down south. Is he from Florida or is he from Murfreesboro? Keyshawn Williams thinks from Murfreesboro. Anyway, Jalen Thompson got on the field at safety. He looked like a freshman in the spring game. Give him credit. He's out there learning, but it's easy in the defensive backfield to look inexperienced. The old adage is the further away you are from the football, the better chance you have to get on the field early. And a lot of times that's corners, wide receivers, not so much defensive tackles and centers. So with that adage, which of these defensive backs might help? I don't have a leader in that clubhouse. You got the two guys that were here in the spring. That helps them. And then the other one's coming in as true freshmen. Unless they come in and just really knock everybody dead, you would expect them to have to wait. And sometimes, like in the old days, the freshmen would come in and have 3 or 4 days of practice before the rest of the team. That would give the coaching staff a chance to work with them, get them acclimated, and also gave the coaching staff an idea of, okay, which of these guys could make a run at getting in the 2 deep. Nowadays, the freshmen are going day one just like the transfers. There's 10 or 11 new transfers that we're not here at Michigan State in spring practice. So a lot of new faces, and the true freshmen, I don't want to say get lost in the shuffle, but in this day and age with the transfer portal and freshmen not having practices by themselves, they do get lost in the shuffle a little bit. As far as the freshmen that were here in the spring, Brady Pretzlaff, an inside linebacker, but Michigan State has a lot of depth at inside linebacker. It's going to be hard to get on the field there. Could he get on the field special teams? Possibly. Offensive lineman, the 2 Lunyeskis, they were here in the spring. Jalen Thompson, the safety. Justin Denson, defensive back. The 2 quarterbacks, Alessio Milivojevic and Rylan Jesse. Those 2 quarterbacks got in. It was good work for them. Are they a threat to be on the field? No, not in case of emergency. So cast them aside. And, of course, Nick Marsh and Brandon Tullis. So I think Marsh and Tullis are for real. Pretzlaff, maybe special teams. Lunyeski, maybe second string. Jalen Thompson and Justin Denson, based on what I saw, probably not second string guys. So those are the true freshmen that were here in the spring. And I think only Nick Marsh, maybe Pretzlaff special teams. And that's just conjecture because we've not seen special teams practice. They've not done it yet. But he's a middleweight size type of guy that maybe could get on the field. I don't know. Or with all those inside linebackers, you just want to just save that redshirt season and put it in the bank, which I think they might have the luxury of doing. The others that are just now reporting, the true freshmen, wide receiver Austin Clay, get in line. Defensive end Kakai Burnett, get in line. I don't know. Tight end Wyatt Hook, it's a guy that I really like. His high school film, smooth, hands, catch radius, cut, good frame. But based on what I saw last week, he has to get acclimated to turning up the tempo, turning up that personal RPM rate to compete on a college field. But he has the talent. But Michigan State at the tight end position may not need him just yet. Defensive back Keyshawn Williams, running back Mekhi Frazier, I don't think so. Rustin Young, got offensive line Peyton Stewart, I don't think so. Andrew Brenton, Jalen Brown, wide receiver, and Mike Schoenbeeler. Mike Schoenbeeler playing some defensive tackle up to about 280. They may need some defensive tackles. I don't close the door on him, but he was more of a defensive end in high school coming out of Chicago Simeon. These are all a lot of I don't knows. I've seen a few days of practice, not much. The coaches have seen a few days of practice, not much. It's a fair question. Which freshman or redshirt freshman could get meaningful snaps? I gave you a lot of I don't knows, and I just went over the whole roster of freshmen and redshirt freshmen. And you can tell a lot of new faces there. The coaches are still getting to know the freshmen, so it's hard to say who's going to be impressing here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. You can ask me again in 4 weeks, right before kickoff. Might have a better idea on some of these guys. I'm sure at some point Jonathan Smith and some of the coaches are going to be asked that question as well. But right now, Joe Rossi, talking about the defense, he says we are still in the evaluation stages. And that's not just the freshmen. That includes guys who've transferred here that are juniors and seniors. They're evaluating right now to see what they have. So it's really early in that. But I appreciate the question. We got 2 more questions coming up here shortly. I want to say, first of all, a message from our friends at Shupan. Did you know that just a few years ago, the state of Michigan ranked first in the nation for deposit container recycling? 90% of all purchased bottles and cans were being redeemed for their deposits at that time. Today, only 73% are being redeemed. That means Michiganders are forfeiting $105 million every year in bottle and can deposits that are not being redeemed. If that's not bad enough, this deficit is also having a negative impact on the environment, with tons of recyclable materials ending up in landfills. Michigan's deposit system creates the cleanest recycling material for the beverage industry to make new cans and new bottles, and it reduces the environmental impact of creating new cans and new bottles when you take them back. When Michigan's recycling rate drops, it hurts the environment, it hurts industry, and it hurts all of us. So help the environment, help your state back in Michigan, help yourself, take them back, take your bottles and cans back. They're your lakes, your roads, your beaches, and it's your dime, so take them back. It's worth your time, and everyone will benefit. Take them back. A message from Shupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. So thank you to Shupan Recycling for that message. Now, let's go over here and check the comments really quick. Number 6 is happy that he's in the starting lineup. Old Tuck, the bell cow, is here. Old Tuck is from Ludington by way of Austin, Texas. Sounds like it might be vacationing in Michigan right now. Marlowe coming in from Grand Blanc, I think it is. Was it a Grand Blanc guy that got a bronze medal in 10,000 meters yesterday? Good job, Bobcats. I don't know if he went to Grand Blanc High School or not. Anyway, Thomas Kohlberg says, hey, Comp, Old Tuck says, just got back from 2 weeks in Ludington, caught a pike the size of Rocky Cerrone's forearm. That's a pretty good pike. It's a pretty good pike. Good for you. You're out there in Ludington. Now, earlier, he was also muskie fishing in Lake Michigan, I take it. Really good. I mean, there's no such thing as good muskie fishing anywhere, I don't think, but just north of here, Lake St. Clair has muskie, some of them, and also sturgeon. I mean, Lake St. Clair and smallmouth bass, big time. A lot of times, if you watch national fishing shows, they'll end up at Lake St. Clair quite often. Old Tuck, Mauston, Wisconsin. I don't know what he means by that. Thomas Kohlberg says, Comp, what's number 1 for you, yellow perch or walleye? Now, that is a tight one. My brother-in-law would say perch. I'm going with walleye, and I don't call them pickerel. Here in Ontario, they call them pickerel, which is okay, and I don't want to offend anybody, but they're walleye, right? I mean, pickerel's a different fish. I mean, if you want to call it a pickerel, that's fine. But if you're going to call a walleye pickerel, then what do you call a pickerel? You can call a zebra a horse if you want to. You can call a zebra a horse if you want to, but if you're going to call a zebra a horse, then what are you going to call a zebra? It's not a horse. Now, I might be mixing them up. Chain pickerel, is that what I'm talking about? I don't know, but they call them pickerel here. But walleye, for sure. I like walleye. And Lake Erie, some say, is the number 1 walleye fishery in the world. I don't know. I've not fished for walleye in Russia. Probably pretty good there. And a lot of people in Lake of the Woods in Minnesota would argue with that. Probably a lot of places off the map in Canada, I would imagine, also. Down the shore from here, Colchester, Ontario. You pull into town and it's called the walleye capital of the world, I think is what their sign says. But that sometimes can be a little misleading as well. I mean, if you drive into Newberry, Michigan, they call themselves the moose capital of something, but it's a small moose herd there. But it's cool. But yeah, great question. The answer is walleye. Bill Hughes says, hey, Jim, which lesser talked about transfer do you believe will be a contributor this fall? Great question, and that's something I'm going to develop later on. As we get into the season, I had it, well, not into the season, but into preseason camp. I was going to talk about, and I don't want to say what stories I'm working on, but in terms of less talked about transfers, that is a good question. That's a good question for the next edition of SpartanMag Live. I'm going to write that right here. From Bill Houston, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Which lesser talked about transfer do you believe will be a contributor this fall? I'm going to use that as a question for SpartanMag Live at 3 and Out, coming up real soon. Sparty Party says, never been muskie fishing, always wanted to, love walleye fishing on Lake Erie. Yeah, and is it Fishin' Dave or Toledo Greg, is that his name? He does a lot of walleye fishing from out there in Toledo. I just got an update, but we're not going to go into that. And Lake Erie is good for the walleye, for sure. And the lake's a lot cleaner than it was 30 years ago. Jonathan McKenby says, is Michigan going to have their national championship taken away? Great question. I would have said no chance a few weeks ago. I just thought they'd get a slap on the wrist, and like the old adage, maybe Cleveland State would get in trouble for it. But gosh, there's a lot of smoke here in the last few days. Chris Ballas had that report a few days ago saying that he was being tipped off, and he has good sources. There's no question that's been proven over the years. And he talked about that the NCAA was talking about 1-year bowl ban, 2-year bowl ban, but Michigan was going to fight it. I don't know what fighting it means these days. I mean, Tennessee fought the NCAA on something a few months ago, and won. That dealt with NIL collective things. So, there's some talk that Michigan would want to welcome a fine. In other words, they just want to throw money at it and pay their way out of it. I don't know, but I really didn't think that postseason ban was on the table because the television broadcast companies are so strong these days. They run everything. And if you take Michigan out of the postseason, that hurts their ability to sell advertising for a number of things. Let me take a break. I'll get back to this in a second. Give me 40 seconds. I'll be back. All right, thanks for waiting. Let me do this. There we go. The Michigan thing. After, where was I? When Ballas was talking about postseason ban, he didn't mention the postseason ban much, or that they would go for it, but they would fight it. And I didn't think that there was a possibility of that because the broadcast companies, they handle the postseason. They need ratings, and Michigan is a big part of that. I mean, for them to sell postseason packages and bowl games without Michigan, that can hurt a little bit. So theoretically, it could. So I kind of thought postseason bans had become a little bit of the thing of the past. Ohio State had a self-imposed postseason ban coming out of the Tressel situation, but I really didn't think that was going to be on the table, firstly. Secondly, in terms of vacating wins, if you go back to 2014, was it Louisville vacated their national championship because of recruiting improprieties? Would that happen again? I mean, the NCAA goes through leadership change all the time, and with leadership change, they lose precedent in terms of in terms of penalties that they've imposed on some institutions in the past, and whether that carries over to others. When the leadership changes, the precedents get lost in the wind a lot of times. So with Louisville having a national championship stripped, I was like, that's not going to happen these days. And then after Michigan won their last game of the season, defeated Washington, the president of the NCAA said that they won fair and square, and everybody thought, well, that means they're off the hook. They won this thing fair and square. Well, they won that game fair and square. By that time, everybody knew that they were cheating weeks earlier, and they weren't cheating anymore, so they won that particular game fair and square. But what about the rest of the season and the cheating that people call the alleged cheating? But now that's coming to light. I mean, yeah, they didn't cheat in the Washington game, but if you're going 90 miles an hour out here in a 45 zone and the cops catch you in the radar and they pull you over and you go from 90 down to 55 to 45 to 30 and they pull you over and the cop says you're doing 95 and a 45, what are you going to tell the cop? Yeah, but I was doing 45 after that. I'm not doing 90 anymore. Doesn't matter. You did 90 back there. You get a ticket for it. Am I wrong about that? So, yeah, the president of the NCAA said that they won that game fair and square, but what about back there when they were doing 90 and a 45? I don't know. So, but now these things are coming out. Was it USA Today or ESPN? Pete Thamel, Dan Murphy, ESPN. They're reporting that Sharon Moore, quote, could be facing NCAA penalties. This is a report by Pete Thamel and Dan Murphy today. That's according to a draft of the NCAA's notice of allegations that were obtained by ESPN. And a possible show cause penalty for Sharon Moore. According to the notice of allegations, allegedly, Sharon Moore may have been involved in deleting a thread of 52 text messages with Connor Stallions. That's from the ESPN report. I mean, this is pretty serious stuff. Also, they're a repeat violator. And you go back to other past coaches, Jim Harbaugh, Chris Partridge, Denard Robinson. They're all accused of, I think, level 1 violations. Chris Partridge was relieved of his duties several months ago, or during the season last year. And according to the notice of allegations, accused of pressuring a player to lie or mislead the NCAA investigation. That's serious stuff. I mean, Jim Tressel lost his job for being non-cooperative with the NCAA or misleading them. And then the stuff about Connor Stallions at the Central Michigan game, according to the notice of allegations, in disguise in Central Michigan gear that day, quote, seriously undermined the integrity of the NCAA collegiate model, unquote. That sounds pretty serious. So all this, we've known all these things, but now you're starting to get them in writing with the notice of allegations. And Harbaugh is accused of not cooperating. He denied the NCAA's request to view relevant messages and phone records. And previous coaches, was it Jesse Minter and Steve Clinkscales, accused of recruiting violations. Clinkscale's still with him, I think. Accused of recruiting violations unrelated to the Scallions scandal. That goes back to the having players on campus for recruiting during COVID shutdown, which, I mean, the head coach at Arizona State lost his job for doing that. So, yeah, we've known this is serious for a long time. So now everybody's just been guessing about what the penalties might be. Well, these are coming out about possible show cause for Sharon Moore. Could he face a suspension? I don't know. I don't know what all this means. But this week, Kentucky, the University of Kentucky football, had to forfeit victories during the 2021 season for, I think it was 11 players, for getting paid for work that they did not do. Now, that's been an old thing for college football and college sports for a long time, players getting paid illegally under the table. These days, that'd be legal because now you can pay players, but they are still getting penalized retroactively for something that's legal now. Kentucky vacating victories from 2021. Is the NCAA setting precedent with that now, showing that they're serious about it? I didn't think there was any way. I doubted that they would lose the national championship. But I've got to tell you, in the last 48 hours, I'm thinking maybe it's possible. I don't know. Kentucky just had all those victories, including a victory in the Citrus Bowl over Penn State, forfeited. Like I said before, Louisville has a basketball national championship that was forfeited. And if you go to the Yum Basketball Arena in Louisville, Kentucky, their home arena, there is no national championship in the rafters. There is one 3 blocks down the road on a sports bar down there. So there'll be people that'll be defiant about it. But a month ago, I'd have said no way. No postseason ban, no forfeited victories. I'm not saying I personally think they shouldn't. I just never thought the NCAA would actually do it. But if you ask me now, I think there's a possibility. So good question. Appreciate that. Let's go to question number 2. Jay Bannon from Sterling Heights asks, he says, I know this is about football, but how have workouts gone with the basketball team? What is the word on the progress of Jeremy Fears, and how is he coming along? And have you heard about the injured players are doing, including Brendan Parachik, Darius Snow, Alex Van Sumeren, Brantley, Stanton Ramil, Charles Brantley, that is, and Gavin Brocious. I hope they're all participating. So that's a long essay question. Again, started out short, but we're going to go long with it. Fears. I've not talked to the coaches, but Jeremy Fears, as you've seen him get more and more run at Moneyball. Moneyball ended on Thursday, and I'm really encouraged watching him dunk. I know I'm not the big guy that evaluates dunk, but that's a guy that was shot in the leg last December, and I was wondering what that would do to his horsepower. And that's not a guy that's ever been like a great quick twitch athlete, but I went and watched him play a couple of weeks ago, elevating really nicely, and he told me that he felt 95%. I have no reason to believe he's not going to make a 100% recovery. And if that had not happened, where would he be now? He'd be at 110%, because after your freshman year, then you add to it and you become better than you used to be, just because you're going through your first off season of intense training and workouts. So rather than going through that, he's continuing rehab. But 2 months ago, I really didn't know what to expect there. Then we saw him get into the Moneyball the first week, second week. First week he was kind of careful. The second week he was dunking, missing dunks, got a goaltending at 6'1", and then last week running and jumping really well. Lateral movement looks good, so I think the horsepower is there. So Fears, I think, is going to be right on schedule to be the starting point guard and being an excellent leader. And again, he lost some development due to that near tragedy, but I think he's going to be starting at point guard, and I think he's going to be a good, solid player with a really good future. As far as the other football players, Brendan Parachek, 6'5", 249 out of Dexter, Michigan. True sophomore. 8 catches, or played in 8 games last year, 6 catches, 55 yards. Injured at the end of the year. Did not play in spring practice due to that injury, so the new coaching staff had not seen him. So Parachek, Alex Van Sumeren, and even Amarion Smith were returning players that the new staff had not yet seen on the field. And I asked Jonathan Smith about those guys and Lindgren a little bit about how intriguing it was for them as coaches to have some of these guys that are holdover players that they had never seen. Very little film of them last year. They went over last year's film to get acclimated with the roster. And then these guys are coming in. They didn't get a chance to work with them in the spring. Saw them around the building. Worked out during the summer. Now they're seeing on the field for the very first time. And Brian Lindgren, offensive coordinator, on Thursday, when asked about Parachek, his eyes lit up. And Lindgren said, hey, some of those NFL tight ends we had at Oregon State, he said Brendan Parachek is right along the lines of those guys. Probably the strongest quote we've heard all preseason. So Parachek, right on schedule. He'll be out there with Jack Velling, Michael Masunis, a third stringer. Tight end position is going to be a strength this year and into the future because Velling has another year of eligibility after this year. So Parachek's looking good. And all these guys that have had injuries in the past, and pretty much all players, you as Michigan State fans need to cross your fingers and knock on wood, but this is what they look like right now. Darius Snow, he's dropped 9 pounds, and he needed to drop 9 pounds. He looked like he was in the process of becoming a standout player at Michigan State and had that catastrophic injury game 1 of the 2022 season. Most people thought it was going to be career-ending. Came back last year, played, and they needed him to play, and then he missed the last 6 games of the year and kind of insinuated and indicated that he had retired from football. But then he came back and he was around in the spring, and when asked about that, he said he just didn't really want to talk about that. In the spring, I got to say, he put on some weight and he looked a step slow. I love Darius Snow. He's got a lot of heart, great kid, great student. But I think even Darius would look at that film and say, I need to be quicker than that. He dropped now 9 pounds during the summer, comes back lighter. Can he help in a very crowded inside linebacker picture? I don't know. I mean, Michigan State went out and got Wayne Matthews, got Jordan Turner coming in from Wisconsin. They've got Cal Halliday and Jordan Hall back. Those are 4 good inside linebackers for 2 positions. Over there at the slot, nickel position, Darius Snow has played over there in the past, being a former safety. Could he slide over there? Maybe. But could he play there against a 3-receiver team? Does he have the speed to run with those guys? I'll have to believe it when I see it, but there's no questioning his heart. But Darius Snow, I'm not really penciling him in as a 2-deep guy right now. Maybe he could change my mind on that. You asked about Van Sumeren. Alex Van Sumeren's one of the more intriguing guys in my opinion. So he's a redshirt sophomore now from Bay City, Essexville Garber High School. Came in as a 4-star recruit. I used to see him at the camps, and when he was in 9th grade, had the frame that looked like he'd be a future 290-pounder, 300-pounder, but just tremendous quickness in the t-shirt camps. Tremendous quickness. That's what enabled him to become a 4-star recruit, top 200 type of guy. Committed to Michigan, then he changed it to Michigan State when his brother transferred to Michigan State. Put on the pads, played as a true freshman in 2022. Played 4 games, shut it down, preserved redshirt status. And that year as a true freshman, it's hard for a true freshman to look good at defensive tackle. It's a position that's not conducive to true freshmen playing and making intermediate impact. You need manly maturity to play defensive tackle. But he got on the field, didn't look bad. He could function. Looked like he had a good future, shut it down, preserved redshirt status. Then the next year, about 12 months ago, went down with a season-ending injury, so we didn't see him the rest of the year. Continued to sit out in the spring. And as I've said on this podcast throughout the summer and the offseason, anytime I'm over at the football building, which is not tremendously frequently, but when we've gone over there for tours or this or that, Van Sumeren's been there. I mean, he's omnipresent. He's there. I don't know if that's the right word, but he is there, and which I took as a sign of really good dedication on his behalf. And I mentioned I saw him at Moneyball with some teammates. I mean, he's into it. He's a program guy. And then I heard that he's not only doing well in the weight room. I had heard from one of the other tours that he like leads the team in bench press. He's the strongest guy in the weight room. Redshirt sophomore. I'm like, that's a great sign. Because one thing I wasn't sure about was his strength. Does not have the longest levers. I talked about the quickness. And when you watched his high school film at Essexville Garber, they did not play the greatest schedule. So he's just like bus versus insect windshield. Bus windshield versus insect, just plowing guys over. It's like, well, who's he going against there? He's going against, 190 pounders. Couldn't really get a read on what his strength was. Then his freshman year at Michigan State was okay. Needed to add some strength. No surprise there. But to hear that about him in the weight room sounds good. And now he's on the field. And I saw him in practice on Tuesday when they were in spider pads. And he's a rotund individual, and you can tell he can bring on the hit and shed, just getting under guys, that power clean movement. You can see that translating for him right now. So Van Sumeren is a very interesting X factor for this team. 2 months ago, I was like, man, I don't know where he is. I don't know what his strength level is. I don't know what his health is. Michigan State lost Simeon Barrow and Derek Harmon. So I was like, I don't know. I don't know where he would fit. They need defensive tackles, right? You've got Maverick Hansen in there. They got Daquan Dowse, transfer from Georgia Tech. Then after the spring, after they lost Harmon and Barrow, they go back into the transfer portal, bring in Ruquan Buckley from Nebraska, kind of a body. A guy that's going to give them a little bit of depth. Probably not somebody who's going to compete for a starting job. And then Ben Roberts coming in from Oregon, an interesting one. And then I'm wondering about Van Sumeren. It's kind of an X factor. Well, right now, I think there's a wide variance on what Alex Van Sumeren could be. I think he could possibly be third string. I think he'll be better than that. I'm anticipating Maverick Hansen and Daquan Dowse starting right now. That could change. You have Buckley. Where's the depth chart at here? Oh, and they brought in Jalen Satchel from Old Dominion as well. And Maverick Hansen was saying some good things about him. I'm expecting Hansen and Dowse to start. Roberts, I went back and watched Oregon's spring game. He has some work to do. Could have a good future. He's a sophomore. But I don't think he's better than Maverick Hansen right now. Hansen is an old pro, an old veteran. Satchel's in there. Buckley's in there. So Van Sumeren's in there. Where does Van Sumeren align and all that? That's what coaches are trying to figure out right now. I think it's a wide variance of potential there. I think he's going to be at least second string. Just a hunch. He could be anywhere from third string to pressing for a starting job. Hey, you guys know I'm not big on hyperbole. I don't overhype people. I'm not closing the door on Van Sumeren possibly becoming the best defensive tackle on the team by the end of midseason or something like that. Or he could be third string. That's what I mean by he has as wide a variance as anybody on the roster. And to me, that's a compliment. That's a plus for a redshirt sophomore. I think, to use a cliche, the sky's the limit for Van Sumeren, and an interesting one and a key one to continue to watch during preseason practice. And if you're just joining right now, go over to SpartanMag.com, check out preseason practice coverage, training camp, Michigan State Spartans, continued coverage and analysis over at the Underground Bunker message board, which is the church of what's happening now for Michigan State sports, the daily narrative of Michigan State sports. Become a SpartanMag subscriber over there. In the meantime, give us a like, subscribe to this channel. That really helps with algorithms, getting this content out to Michigan State fans that may not have heard of us, and it helps all of us. We really appreciate that. As far as others, when you're asking about formerly injured players, we talked about Parachek, Snow, Van Sumeren. Charles Brantley, another interesting one with a wide variance. 6 feet, 170, the guy. He arrived at Michigan State paperweight thin, and he's still paperweight thin, but he hits hard for a little guy and kind of breaks himself sometimes. 4-star guy coming in from Sarasota. He's still 170. Last year played 3 games, injured, shut it down. Now, was he really out for the season? Or did he shut it down to preserve redshirt status to go into the portal? Some people think it's the latter. And hey, these guys are all professionals these days, pretty much. I don't begrudge him of that. He went into the portal. I'm not sure he got all the offers he may have expected. Came back. He's got 15 career starts. As a sophomore 2 years ago, played 11 games, missed the final game of the season against Penn State. The year before that, as a true freshman, he led Michigan State in pass breakups with 6. Actually, I mean, his sophomore year, he led the team with pass breakups with 6, played nearly 700 snaps. The year before that, as a true freshman in 2021, played in 8 games, started the 8th game against Purdue. That's after Michigan State beat Michigan, went down with a season-ending injury. So 3 years, 3 seasons ended with season-ending injuries. I'm not sure how serious the injury was his sophomore year. That was the end of the year against Penn State. Unclear how injured he was that day, but he's a little guy that hits hard and he breaks himself. He repped as a first stringer in the spring. He has first string experience, and everybody remembers when he secured the victory over Michigan with an interception in the final minutes as a true freshman in 2021. So he's had some heroic moments. Like I said, 15 career starts. Joe Rossi, the new defensive coordinator, said last week, that he appreciates all the people that have started in the past. He didn't come out and say it this way, but he inferred that just because you started in the past doesn't mean you're going to be starting now. Might not even be playing now. So he said he appreciates those guys, but they're evaluating everybody. Brantley's among those getting evaluated. Did not add a lot of weight, but I assume he's healthy. He's on the field. He's auditioning as a redshirt junior, 4th-year guy in the program. He's trying to earn trust with the new coaches. That's where he is. Stanton Ramil, we talked about him earlier. Looks good to me at 6'7", 305. Dropped 7 pounds from last year. Moving pretty well. In terms of internal excitement about offensive linemen, the previous staff had more excitement about Stanton Ramil maybe than anyone in the offensive line room. Then went down 12 months ago with a season-ending injury. Didn't see him as much in the spring. Saw him last week. He's an intriguing one for this training camp. Stay healthy, be a second stringer, get some traction. It's good for the program that a guy like that didn't go into the portal. A guy from a long way from home, from Alabama, coaching change, stays with the program. It's a good sign for him, so he's got to stay healthy. I think he's got a good future. I'm not sure he competes for a starting assignment this year, but an important second stringer. Gavin Brocious, redshirted in 2022. Last year missed the whole season with an injury, so it's another guy that's a third-year player from Surprise, Arizona, that we've never seen on the field in a game. We did see him in the spring for the first time, and I had him listed as one of the surprise players at the spring scrimmage. I'm not saying he was great, but he looked functional. And for a guy that's never been on the field, that was positive. And then since then, he added 14 pounds. That's second most on the team behind Daquan Dowse. So Gavin Brocious in the spring competed for the left guard starting job with Christian Phillips. Phillips has an edge on him there, but I think Brocious is right there showing that he can play some functional football. So that's something I did not know about him 6 months ago. Now he's added weight. So keep an eye on Brocious. He's another one that could make some noise during preseason camp. All right, we appreciate Jay Bannon from Sterling Heights with that question. 3 and out, the third question, final question from Desert Sparty in Arizona. He says, who is your Michigan State preseason player of the year on offense and defense? Another tough question, and I'll answer that question with a question back at you. Who do you think was the defensive player of the year for Michigan State last year? Was there one? Who was the offensive player of the year last year? Was there one? They don't give that out as an award anymore. I mean, for decades, they used to have the football bust at the end of the season, and they would do postseason awards, and they would hand out team MVP, offensive MVP. They don't do that anymore. That kind of got, and late in the D'Antonio era, it became less of a public thing and more of an internal family and friends thing. Then COVID didn't have it, and Mel Tucker didn't have it again. Do they bring that back? The old football bust, I think Michigan might still have theirs. I'm not sure. That was a thing from the 70s and 80s. I'm not sure that's ever coming back. So those old, team MVPs, you'd have a list of MVPs going back to the 1950s. Officially, there have not been team MVPs in recent years. So just talking theoretically, who was the offensive MVP last year? I would say Nate Carter, pretty good player. Rushed for over 700 yards for a terrible offense. The quarterbacks were terrible. The offensive line was terrible. The wide receivers, not so great. Torrey Foster had a little bit of a breakthrough with 40 catches. But I think Nate Carter's the only answer there for a terrible offense. He's a good player. Last year on defense, defensive player of the year, defense was not good. Again, Cal Halliday led the team in tackles with 91. Was it Halliday? I don't think so. Angelo Gross, second on the team with 72 tackles. Was it Angelo Gross? He was hot and cold, playing several positions. Malik Spencer, 72 tackles, third on the team in tackles. I don't remember a lot of mistakes from Malik Spencer. Jordan Hall came in as a true freshman, started half the year at linebacker, 67 tackles. Certainly looks good for the future. MVP, I don't think so. The next, 5 of the next 6 players, tackle leaders on the team, are no longer with the team. Aaron Brule graduated. Jaden Mangum transferred. Derek Harmon transferred. Simeon Barrow transferred. Zion Young transferred. The only other one in the top 10 in tackles that's back is Dylan Tatum, and it's a learning experience for him at corner, playing corner out of necessity, out of emergency, not his natural position. Now he's moving back to safety. So last year, defensive MVP, maybe there wasn't one. So every year there's not a defensive MVP every year. I guess I'd go with Malik Spencer because he functioned, and I don't remember him making all that many mistakes. So you're asking this year, who's the offensive and defensive MVPs? You guys in the comment section, you guys can put your predictions in there. Your guess is as good as mine. I'm guessing on offense, the first one you look at is quarterback Aiden Childs. I think he'll be pretty good. I think it'll be a learning process for him as well. I'm guessing a little bit up and down. If he does have a good enough season that he's offensive MVP, that means Michigan State probably wins 6 or 7 games at least. Is that going to happen? That could happen. Am I predicting that'll happen? Not just yet. He certainly has all the tools. Nate Carter coming back, a more run-oriented offense with a questionable offensive line. Can he get over 1,000 yards? I think he can make a run at that. I think K'Ron Lynch-Adams will take some of his carries, but I think Carter is going to do a little bit more out of the backfield. I think he had 22 catches last year, but only averaged like 5 yards per catch, which is low figures. It's a guy with hands that can catch it, but 5 yards per catch, not his fault. That's probably the fault of the scheme. This scheme, the way they do a lot of misdirection throwbacks, I think running backs have a little bit more chance to get yards after catch in this system. So I think he's going to do a little bit more damage as a receiver as well. Jack Velling's going to be a good tight end. Last year had 22, 25 catches at Oregon State, second team, all Pac-12. Very good tight end. But even if you're a very good tight end, like a borderline all Big Ten type of tight end, how many catches do you actually get? Maybe not more than 25. Can you be an offensive MVP of your team with only 25 catches? Hard to do at that position. You can be a great impact player at that position, but team offensive MVP, hard to do. He was excellent in the red zone. They really look him up in the red zone at Oregon State, and I think that'll continue. I think he tied for the lead in the nation for touchdown catches among tight ends. So he's still going to be a big factor in the red zone if Michigan State can ever get to the red zone. And when they do get to the red zone. So Velling is good, MVP material, hard to do at that position. Montori Foster comes back after getting 44 catches last year, breakthrough season. He says his quote this week was a good quote on a story from Paul Konadike over at SpartanMag.com. Montori Foster said, quote, "Now I've got to take it to another level," unquote. So Montori Foster has some confidence. He's in a new system. He's excited about it. I think he could make a run at 60 catches. So I think Montori Foster's a possibility there. So Montori Foster, Nate Carter, Aiden Childs, my guess would be the 3 top candidates. I think the safe bet would be Nate Carter, although that award does not actually exist officially. Defensive MVP, you would think that whoever starts at Mike linebacker would be the leading candidate, but we don't know who's going to start at Mike linebacker. The toughest competition for the starting job right now, the most crowded position room, is inside linebacker. You have Jordan Hall coming back as a true freshman, Cal Halley coming back as a venerable fifth-year senior. They got Jordan Turner, who had 18 starts at Wisconsin. He was honorable mention All Big Ten linebacker as a sophomore 2 years ago. Last year kind of fell out of the playing group, went into the portal, coming back to the state of Michigan, his home state to be a Spartan. Jordan Turner could start in front of either of those guys at inside linebacker. Wayne Matthews, a versatile, dependable guy transferring in from Old Dominion. So who's starting there? You could be inclined to say, okay, Jordan Hall is going to continue to improve and be the starter at inside linebacker, get a lot of tackles. Maybe he's the MVP, but I'm not sure he's starting. Jordan Turner could come in and start, or Jordan Turner might be a second stringer. Your MVP might most likely come from that position, but I don't know who the starter is. I think Michigan State's going to get 2 good quality players to start there, and they'll go to the bench, and they will use 4 guys at those 2 positions. And Jordan Hall will play outside linebacker in pass rush situations. So in terms of sacks, Jalen Thompson dropped some weight. They used him at rush defensive end. Now he's back on the strong side. Where does he settle in at? He was surprisingly good last year as a true freshman. He's a guy that could make some noise in terms of tackles for loss, which could translate to a defensive MVP type of season. Or, Malik Spencer's back at safety. Might have been my pick for MVP last year. He's back. Another year older. So I wouldn't doubt Malik Spencer. Who would be my choice among those? I'd go with Spencer again, I guess. Although some of those other guys could prove to be more dynamic as pure playmakers. So those are the 3 questions. We're done with that. Let me check the comments here real quick, see if there's anything else we want to touch on before we sign off. Thomas Kohlberg asks me, what's number 1, yellow perch or walleye? What do you guys think? What's number 1, yellow perch or walleye? Yeah, my brother-in-law says yellow perch. I told you he'd say that. What do you think, Lori? Do you have a vote on that one? Shouldn't have a vote. She said yellow perch? I'm outvoted 2-1, yellow perch. I'm a walleye guy. And I went through the pickerel thing a minute ago, too. I hope I didn't create any enemies up and down the coast. But as a question here, that's what they were asking. Sparty Party says, never. Okay, we went through that already. Anthony Howard says, get the best player on the field, start Marsh. I don't disagree with that. I think that could happen. Maybe even at slot. And like I said earlier, maybe you put him at either of the two, and who would be more likely to move into the slot, or maybe they change it. These guys will change window dressing with formations from play to play to play. Sometimes you want to keep wide receivers at one specific position. Does Foster have enough experience that he can move around without getting jumbled up too much? I don't know. That's something to keep an eye on, but I think Marsh has the versatility to just go in the slot and stay there all year. Or do all 3 of these guys, can they mix and match from play to play to be something to watch? I don't know the answer to that, and they probably won't tell us. We'll have to wait and see. Robert Willie says, I don't think it's a good thing to project depth charts with very limited info. You can't really get a great perspective. I think we just need to wait. I agree with that. I respect that opinion, but there's a lot of people that kind of want to know what's going on in the program, the roster, and there's a lot of new faces on the roster. 43 new scholarship players in the program. So our series previewing the depth chart is to get people reacclimated with the new names and faces in the program and where they fit in. So that's what we're doing here in the month of August, because there's no actual football taking place. Rob South says, what's up, fellas? By the way, I didn't get into the starting lineup. Number 6 is in the starting lineup. Old Tug the Bell Cow. He's starting in the center position. Marlowe from Grand Blanc. He's our shooting guard. Kohlberg's running the point. And Thomas Kohlberg will be our stretch 4. That's the starting lineup. JR Jr. says, go green, baby. Snyder Phillips Stan says, notice of allegations against Michigan. I talked about that a moment ago. Snyder Phillips Stan. You got to like that name for a YouTube handle. We've got JR Jr. says, doesn't matter, vacated or otherwise, their national championship and 3 Big Ten championships will forever bear asterisks. That's what JR Jr. says, no matter how favorable NCAA treats the cheaters. It's an editorial opinion from JR Jr. We appreciate that. We welcome those. Karen is saying go green from Naples, Florida. It's good to have Karen chiming in. She's been here a few times. She's found us a few more times. That's good. Good to have her back as a returning Magger here on SpartanMag Live. Card Chart Chris from Forsyth County, Georgia. Tom Helderman, my good friend, MSU 66, Tom and Tanya here, says, great to see you on Lake Erie again. Really rely on your insights. Interesting season coming up. Thanks a lot, Tom. Great to hear from you. Tell Tanya we said hello. Zar Shahid says, go green comp. Zar Shahid says, pride comes before the fall. I think that's probably true. Pat Rothwell says, hey, great show. Glad to see you're live. Connor Egan says, how does Milojevic look? If you had a chance to see him. Watched Milojevic in the, I thought that butterfly was going to come in and attack me. A lot of monarchs here. I don't know if but the monarchs like to go here before they migrate south. They collect here pretty heavily. Not yet, though. Milojevic, we went over that. If you subscribe to Spartan Mag, when we went over the quarterback's position, I went in-depth detail on each of the 4 quarterbacks and how they did in the spring showcase. And Milojevic, I thought, was better than Ryland Jesse, but they're young guys that have a ways to go. Let me see here. Let me find my Milojevic notes. We do pluses and minuses. I think he had 2, maybe 3 possessions, maybe 2. and that was with the third string. I guess a third string defense. I had him with 2 pluses and 1 neutral. The plus, completion to Janicic. Janicic, by the way, freshman, walk-on that I think can play somewhere, if not Michigan State, at some point. I got to find him. I think he's from the Catholic League. I don't have him committed to memory yet. Jack Janicic, he changed numbers this spring from 31 to 22. 6'3" wide receiver from Warren De La Salle. So he redshirted last year. I'd never heard of the guy. Shows up in the spring game and looked pretty good. Don't want to generalize too much, but kind of a slippery Blair White type of guy with good cuts, good hands, catch radius. I was so intrigued by him that I went back and watched his high school film. And I don't think I've got it in my notes here, but I didn't think he looked bad. I can't remember for sure the superlatives, but Jack Janicic is a walk-on wide receiver to keep an eye on, redshirt freshman. Anyway, Milojevic completed a pass to Janicic in the first quarter. There's a slot short out at 6 yards. Just, a possession type intermediate, not even intermediate, but a possession throw and catch. Nothing great from Milojevic, but he made a read, made a throw, accurate. That would put that down as a plus. Gave him a neutral, making a third read on a flare to Jalen Berger. Caught the ball, but he lost 3 yards. I thought when you go back and look at it, when I'm sitting there watching it with a coffee and a donut, gaining weight, watching the film in slow motion, I could see that Janicic was open on a 7-yard curl, and it looked like Milojevic was looking in that direction, but he didn't go to it. He threw back to the flare. Who knows? Maybe he was told in the headset to throw the flare. I don't know, because now they're hearing it with the headset. Those are the new rules. That's the type of thing that it looked like if that were a third down play and they have to punt and it's a key play in the game, that'd be the type of play that I might go back and ask Brad Salem, hey, did he make the right read on that? And especially if it's a game that they end up winning. I know Brad Salem was not at Michigan State anymore, but in the past, we used to be able to do that. And just so I could get a better read on how the quarterbacks were progressing, I would wonder, should he have gone with Janicic there? And Brad used to say, yeah, Janicic was the read. He was open, and he saw it on film. Brad would tell me things like that, and it was good to have a handle on player development when you can talk to assistant coaches in that manner. Sometimes it's off the record, but it just gives you an idea of what's going on. So in that one, I don't know if it was a misread or not. I'd like to know. But again, Janicic was open on that one. I gave him a plus also, talking about Alessio Milivojevic again, the true freshman quarterback from Naperville, Illinois. He'd originally committed to Ball State, and Michigan State at the 11th hour got him to decommit and enroll early. I gave him a plus on a gain of 4 to wide receiver Grant Calcagno on a shallow crossing route, which kind of became a sit-down route because he sits down in the zone. And Sam Edwards, a guy that I really like at linebacker, took a deep drop. Calcagno sat down. Milojevic completed it to him. So no mistakes from Milivojevic. So you asked me what I've seen from him. Those are my notes on Milojevic from the spring game. He's in a program with Aiden Childs. Childs is the guy for the foreseeable future, of course. Michigan State with a commitment from Leo Hannon, a guy from California that I really like, high school senior right now. So the quarterback situation looks pretty good. Milivojevic, they like to have him in the program because they needed some bodies in the program, because when Jonathan Smith took over, Michigan State had 0 scholarship quarterbacks. They were all in the transfer portal. Kim and Hauser and Levitt were all in the portal. So Michigan State had 0 scholarship quarterbacks on campus for the first time since World War II when Jonathan Smith was hired. So they brought in Childs, and they got transfer from North Dakota, Tommy Schuster, kid from Chippewa Valley, Macomb Township, Michigan, coming back home after 5 years at North Dakota. Good, solid, experienced backup. And then you flip the 2 high school kids. So they had to totally revamp that room. And Milojevic is in there. Does he stay at Michigan State long term? Look across the country right now. I think like 70% of starting quarterbacks across the country are transfers. So that's just that's the trend. Does it stay that way? I don't know. But they're happy to have Milivojevic in the program for now, for sure. And he's happy to be at Michigan State. He's worth watching. All right, we got Ralph Pinella says he's the next door wine guy. Excited for Smith era to begin. Pat from Memphis, Michigan, checking in. we actually have a fair number of viewers right now. I was not expecting many viewers on a Sunday afternoon for a podcast that we did not promote earlier. I gave you guys about 20 minutes notice on this. Connor Egan says he went walleye fishing at Put In Bay, and all 6 of us hit our limit. It was awesome. Put In Bay is right over there, so good for you, Connor. JJ McKay from the Keweenaw Peninsula checking in, says good afternoon. He's got good weather up there, I'm sure. Ray White says go green. Connor Bushini says, nice hair, by the way, Connor. He says, what would you guess the starting linebacker, defensive line, defensive end look like come week 1? And it's not actual hair. He's wearing a pom-pom for hair, for those of you that are not watching. He says, what would you, and I'm not one to comment on hair, that's for sure. What would you guess the starting linebacker, defensive line, defensive end would be? My guess right now, I defensive end, I thought Jalen Thompson and Quindarius Dunnigan. Dunnigan is the transfer from Middle Tennessee State, and he was second team all-conference in the American Conference, and I thought it looked pretty good in the spring game. Jalen Thompson, favorable true freshman season last year. They moved Jalen Thompson from defensive end to rush end, that stand-up defensive end position that Joe Rossi had at Minnesota. They tried him there. Now Jalen Thompson this week was back at strong side defensive end. Now, are they doing that just to give him a look at both? Because he lost a few pounds during the summer, which led me to believe that they're trying to fine-tune him to that rush position. At the rush position, there was one time, that rush position, rush end, has to drop into coverage and run with receivers sometimes. And there was one play in the spring game when he had to drop into coverage and run with Adamole Faleye, who's like a 4th-string tight end, who's a pretty good athlete, and Thompson, who's a good defensive end, but covering a guy like that on a crossing route, that's not his natural habitat. And Faleye was open. They hit him with a pass. They would like to have a defensive end be able to run with someone like that. In man-to-man, I don't know. You would think mostly it'd be dropping into zone. Maybe they're just showing man-to-man to just get people off target in terms of people watching it for scouting purposes. I don't know. So Thompson was at strong side defensive end this week. Does it mean he's there forever and for good? I'm not going that far. I think he might end up back at rush end because the thinking was he's at strong side and that Chris Bogle is the rush end. Now, Chris Bogle had played some stand-up rush end at Florida, had some good productivity early in his career, came to Michigan State, looked pretty good against the run for 3 or 4 games in 2022, went down with a season-ending injury. Played last year and was just kind of okay. Comes back for his 6th year of eligibility. In the spring game, just kind of okay. I know he wants to be better than that, and they need him to be better than that, and that's what he's trying to do. But I'm not going to tell you he's great. I'm kind of expecting Dunnigan to be ahead, to be at defensive end, and Thompson at the rush end with Bogle behind him. But this week it was Thompson at defensive end. Bogle seemed like they're talking about him being the rush end. So where's Dunnigan and all of that? I'm not sure. But I'm just going to go with my eyes and what I thought originally. I'm going to think Thompson and Dunnigan start at defensive end. Maybe I'm wrong. Bogle will get some playing time. Anthony Jones transfer from Indiana, rush end, a guy that played with Chad Wilt last year at Indiana, started 4 games. Chad Wilt comes to Michigan State as the new rush end position coach. He's in the mix. Chad Wilt was defensive line coach for Rossi for 2 years at Minnesota. So there's a lot of familiarity there. They go into the portal, they get Jones. So don't close the door on Jones either. Went back and watched him against Michigan State a few weeks ago. He was okay. I'm not saying he's a difference maker, but he's in the mix there. And he's a West Coast guy that previously was he at Arizona or something? I've forgotten where he was previously. But you're asking me who are the starting defensive ends? I'm going to stick with Thompson and Dunnigan. Although the first week of practice makes me wonder about that. Makes me wonder where Dunnigan is. I know they like him. But Bogle came out for interviews. They're talking like Thompson is back at the other one, so that confuses me a little bit, but maybe they're just rehearsing some things and evaluating things. I'm going to stick with Thompson and Dunnigan. And you're asking me the entire defensive line. I'm expecting Hansen and Douse to start at defensive tackle, but like I said, don't close the door on Van Sumeren. I just have a hunch there. I've not heard anything. But I think his personal trajectory is on a positive slope right now. Linebacker, I'm guessing, I don't know. I know they like Halliday. I know they like Jordan Turner. And whoever starts might not be the people that finish games. I'm going to guess Hall and Turner. Just a guess. Jordan Hall, Jordan Turner. Don't know. Check out your Jordans. Nice new Jordans. So, Clinkscale went to the NFL. Thanks, Tim. Jar Shahid says, is the future of the quarterback room post Childs with one of the freshmen right now, or can you see someone coming in and taking over? I like the Hannon kid who's got a commitment from California. Go watch his film. I think he looks good. There's a few times. You're seeing more of these guys now in their high school film. Not all of them can, but Hannon's one of these guys that rolls around and you'll see, like, in traffic, like a Matthew Stafford throw, which previously only Matthew Stafford would do that. Maybe Bernie Kosar in the old days. Now you're seeing high school guys do that, and Hannon can do that among other things, and he's mobile. I think that's a good one, and Michigan State's going to have to hustle to hang on to him. Ray Leahy says, I heard something about Aiden Childs getting an injury that they didn't know if he'd ever get to his potential because of it. Any truth to that? I have not heard that at all. Doors Fan 91 says, just want to say hi, Comp. Enjoyed meeting you back in June at the Okemos Battle Creek Lakeview High School baseball game. Yeah, Doors Fan, I did meet you that day. That was a fun day, and it was great meeting you that day as well. Thanks for coming and saying hi, saying hello. J.J. McKay says he broke his arm in high school. He's fine. J.J. McKay is saying something I did not know, so thank you, J.J. McKay. I think that's just about everybody. J.J. McKay says yellow perch, then walleye. Another vote for yellow perch. O-line situation. Illest eggplant is asking me. Yeah, you got me to say that. Sorry. What are my thoughts on the offensive line situation? Hey, I wrote about 2,500 words on the offensive line situation a week and a half ago. Go to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber, read it. That's the depth chart breakdown, and we go over the pluses and minuses from the spring game. I go over pluses and minuses from Luke Newman in his game against Boston College last year for Holy Cross. Go check it out over there. Mike G says, looks like Connor Stallion spying on Central Michigan's sideline was made official about an hour ago. Okay. Donald Person says, do you think the secondary will be better this year? I think it's possible. That's about it. We're gonna wrap it up. I could go for, I know that's a lame answer to say I think it's possible, but we got to wrap it up now. And the defensive backfield, we'll talk about that more as training camp continues and as we get into the season. They got a lot of they've got a lot of experience back there. I like the way I think Joe Rossi's going to have a system that the players are going to get their heads around better earlier, and they'll build off that as they go and not subject them to paralysis by analysis. So I think they're going to have a handle on it. Malik Spencer at safety. I think Nakai Martinez is in there with them, the transfer from Central Florida. Intrigued to see how he comes along. Dylan Tatum at safety, and all those guys can also play the nickel, so I think there's some flexibility there. At the corners, Chance Rucker looked okay as a true freshman last year. You expect him to improve. Angelo Gross still out there, and I think there's a chance Angelo Gross can be better. He was a guy that I think was there was too much volume in the defensive playbook, and he's one of the players that it kind of wigged him out a little bit. So he's around. I think there's a chance he could be more solvent. The other corners, you got Rucker, you got Brantley. Ed Woods coming in from Arizona State, I think he's got a real good chance to start. So there's a big collection of players there. A lot of veteran guys. Can they get a good 4 or 5 out of that? I would think so. And if they stay healthy, can the defensive backfield get better as they continue to play with one another, get used to one another, get acclimated to the system? I think there's a good chance of that. So anyway, we're going to wrap it up now. Appreciate everybody checking in. Appreciate everybody with the comments. Thanks for the likes. Give us a like if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel. Go to SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. We'd love to have you over there. I'm going to run now. Hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend. I'll be back in East Lansing tomorrow morning, Monday morning, for continued coverage. Spartan training camp. They'll be in full pads for the first time on Monday. Was there anything else I was going to get to? I think that does it. Anyway, thanks for checking in. And we'll probably have a VCast on Monday after practice. We'll see you then. Thanks a lot. And go to SpartanMag.com for more coverage. Thanks a lot.